Welcome everyone to Understanding Pride for Recovery Coaches. I'm glad that you guys are here. My name is Johanna Dolan. I'm very grateful to be here with you today talking about this topic. And I just want to say thank you very much, Mesha and Sikar, for making this possible. It's not too far in our distant past that these types of things would happen, would not happen. So this is huge, and I just thank you for that. This program is like our LGBT cultural awareness in that it is designed to be part of the process of creating a network of visible allies who can support the LGBTQ community. Like, we have a lot of diversity, and we're not always supported because we're not always seen, right? Like, we've had to stay in the shadows, which is part of what we're going to talk about today. And that lack of visibility, and now being able to start to look visible now, to start to be visible now, that is a huge learning curve for us. So being able to create a network of visible allies really helps the LGBT community to be fully ourselves. And while this educational session provides information and resources related to sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, and it's super heavy because we're talking about our history, we're going to have some fun as we go through this. So that you guys know, I'm a professional coach. I am a recovery coach, professional trainer. I am a national LGBT Cancer Network cultural competency trainer, and I've started LGBT groups. I've provided equality and equity trainings, much like this one, in varied settings, from police departments to hospitals to 28-day rehabs to churches, corporations. I've trained lots of recovery coaches. And one of the things that I've learned is that having the basic information is massively important. And thinking through how you can apply this information in your individual and organizational settings is really how we create practical change in setting appropriate ways. So I want to go through a few guidelines before we really kick off. Number one is that we're having a conversation, which means I encourage you to participate. Please ask questions, make comments. I'm going to ask you guys questions, and I've got the chat box right here. I've got you guys right here, and I've got the screen. So the same PowerPoint you guys see, I see right here. And that way you know what's going on with my eyes. So know that I'll ask questions from time to time. Like, I see some people in here that they know just as much, maybe more than I do. So I'm going to draw on that. And the last thing is, like, just the second one is, please respect each other. I expect that you're going to respect me because I respect you. Choosing to be here to learn about this topic is really awesome. And you may hear viewpoints that you don't agree with, and that's okay. It is 100% okay to hear things and to not agree with things. And I just ask that you're tolerant with each other. And that's it. So let's do this. Okay, so today we're going to give a little bit of information to understand what LGBT Pride is and what Pride commemorates. We're also going to talk about some of the symbols that unite us. And we're going to talk about finding encouragement, right? Because if you guys hear something that you're like, oh my God, like, I had no idea, and find that to be discouraging, don't worry. There's lots of encouraging things. So we're going to talk about Pride Month and our heroes, and also about finding Pride events in your community. So here's the first question. What do you guys think Pride is? What do you think? I can see hands. Oh, what you got, Patrick?
Hey there. I think Pride is celebrating and being proud of our identity as gay men, lesbians, trans, wherever on the spectrum we may fall. But it's coming to that sense of being, I'm who I'm supposed to be and made the way I'm supposed to be made.
Nice. I love that way of looking at it.
Jordan,
Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm gonna meet you.
Who else has something? What do you think pride is?
Just a minute.
What you got, Khalees?
I mean, I'm not perfect, but like, I just want to say, like, appreciating how far we've come, we've come in like the battles and the struggles that all these people had to go through, and nobody had access to or privilege to say who they were and have acceptance for that and be treated as human beings and people who are just normal. And so I think that celebrating how far we've come is a big thing as well, and appreciating our ancestors for walking that path for us to have this today.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, you guys, I mean, you guys nailed it, right? So that's exactly what pride is. It is a recognition of the various identities in the LGBTQ community. And there's a lot of identities in our community, right? We are made up of people from all walks of life, from all religions, from all races, from all socioeconomic classes, all sorts of educational backgrounds. That the thing that draws us together is that we are all sexual orientation and gender identity minorities. And so there's lots of different ways of saying that. And the easiest way is to say LGBTQ. The other thing that pride does is it increases our visibility, right? Like, one of the things that we know as human beings is that you just cannot hate someone up close. Once you get to know someone, it's difficult to hate us, and if you don't see us, then we are mythology, right? And then everything that someone says about us that's negative or not true, like those things, I'm laughing at the look, Tito's looking fancy. You are, dude, you look good. So everything that's not true about us is suddenly, make like the light is shown, and so we get to be seen as who we actually are. It affirms us, right? Many of us, when we grow up, we may be the only LGBT person that we know, especially if we live in a rural community. Then the chances of us actually knowing someone like us, or at least knowingly knowing someone like us, are pretty slim. So it also continues the fight for equal rights for the LGBT community. Just like every other minority group in this country and around the world, we still have to fight for our rights. In the United States, we have the 14th Amendment, which guarantees us our rights. And because there were laws that took those away at state and local and even federal levels, we have to work to change the systems to be able to fully possess all of the same rights that our cisgender heterosexual counterparts have. The other piece is that it increases our diversity. One of the things that you'll pick up, or you'll see, or you'll recognize, or you'll hear is that it has been safer for white people to be more visible, right? And as LGBT people in total become more accepted by communities, it enables us to actually see everyone who's part of our community. And that means like races and religions and all of the other things that intersect with the LGBT community. So we are diverse and we are many. And the other thing is that it increases our dignity. Like, when you don't have to lie and cover up who you are because of fear that you're not going to be accepted, or that people are not going to care for you, or that they might even discriminate against you, you have the dignity that comes from being a human being. And so that's the other thing that pride does. So you might be asking like, well, why do the LGBT community need to have our dignity recognized? What do you guys think? What you got, Khalees?
I think, well, like I said, I'm not perfect. I'm just going out. But like, I love that quote, you know, how will people know unless we tell them? So for people who've never been able to have those conversations, or they come from that, you know, home that's in a rural community where they've been hiding and they don't know what's going on, like, how will they know that they're able to explore or even discover, or, you know, to have that support unless they see that and they hear about that and they know that? So I think that, you know, it's like, our voices are louder together than as individuals. So, you know, and when you see people that you can relate to and you share common interests with, you find belonging and you feel like you're not crazy or alone or just in this bubble of yourself. I don't know. Does that help?
Yeah, I love that answer. Thank you. That's an awesome answer. So why else do you guys think? Why might we be, what you got, Laura?
No, will you repeat your question though?
Yeah, sure. So my question is why do you think that part of Pride is increasing our dignity?
Hmm. Well, because I think for ever, you know, before we didn't have that dignity. We were not afforded that dignity. And I believe also that maybe it's just my personal experience, but like even going to being involved in Pride has been life-changing because it does help to, like Khalees was saying, to bring people together. Like I didn't know about all the different possibilities that were available to me until Pride came along, or at least I came along to Pride, and so it really kind of first one was in New York City in 1993, and that changed everything for me, and it opened my heart and my mind, and it did give me a sense of dignity because I knew then that I was not a misfit. Okay, well, maybe in other ways I am, but I belong everywhere I go. And just because a person has whatever sexual orientation it may be, does not strip them of their dignity, their respect, or their belonging as a human being.
Nice. Thank you for that. Yeah, like being seen gives us so many things. Well, and in addition to all of that, right, is that knowing what Pride commemorates is super important. You know, many of us, right, won't even think twice about what we wear. Yet it wasn't that long ago. In fact, like until the 80s or the 70s in some places, but the 80s and the 90s in many places, that wearing it was a law that you had to wear at least 2 articles of clothing from your perceived gender. Yeah, right. I see your faces. Yeah, like that's part of the reason why the Stonewall riots happened, you know? So before I go too far in advance though, what does Pride commemorate? Do you know? What you got, Patrick?
Well, you have it on the screen there, the Stonewall Uprising, which was in New York City in 1969, when, and as you said, Johanna, the differences in both what the laws were and the police harassment and everything. And at one point, the police were raiding the Stonewall Inn in June 1969, and the patrons there fought back, and they just finally, as we all know, you know, we get to a breaking point, right? And this was sort of a collective breaking point, and at least in my view, that the people who were there were just tired of being pushed around, and fought back. And it was the whole panoply of who we are as a community. And it you know, continued for a couple of days and obviously spilled out into the West Village in New York City. But that was the sort of what I also think is it was sort of the first time where a group of us stood up for ourselves. And if you look back in the history in 50s and 60s, there were other ways that community members were doing that. But in particular, in this way, sort of pushing back hard against the oppression.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much, Patrick. So I use this particular picture of Stonewall Uprising because it is the name of a really good documentary that's put out by the Public Broadcasting System, so PBS, or Public Broadcasting Service. So it's PBS, and you can Google it and you can watch this video. It's unlike some of the movies that have come out around Stonewall. And what it does is it lays the foundation for all the things that were bubbling up during the Stonewall Uprising. Because Patrick's right. While it's not the first, it is certainly the one that kicked everything off as far as resistance to what was going on with laws and the police. And it also this is the one that we commemorate. So when we celebrate Pride, what we are really celebrating is the courage. I'm giving myself goosebumps. We are celebrating the courage of all of these people who were extraordinarily marginalized in ways that we can't even imagine today. Even those of us that have been out for 20, 30, 40 years, these folks laid the foundation for everything that you see today about what Pride is. These folks laid the foundation for us to be able to have laws, for us to be able to be protected, for us to be able to one day have gotten, the Defense of Marriage, like gotten rid of the Defense of Marriage Act, right? And for us to be here in this room having this conversation. So one of the things about Stonewall and about many clubs and bars like it is that one of the only places where it was safe, moderately safe, I say safe in like huge air quotes, is because it wasn't safe, right? But the way that people made space for us is by taking advantage of us. So the mob owned the Stonewall Inn, and the mob would turn its head when we came and made it an LGBT bar because they made a lot of money from us. Sex work and prostitution is part of many people's stories of coming out, because it's one way that you survive and you are able to progress and get to the place that you can thrive. Many of us are subjected to, we still to this day are subjected to being kicked out of our homes, to being kicked out of our communities, to being fired from our jobs or losing our home, like actually losing leases and those types of things, simply because we either make a choice to come out or someone forces us out, right? And that is part of what they were, that system was much more aggressive in 1969 during the Stonewall Uprising. It was that if you were trans, if you were cross-dressing at all, you had to wear 2 items of clothing that matched the gender that you had on your birth certificate, which for those of you that have been to any of the LGBT classes that we do, like there's more than 2 genders, right? There's more than 2 sexes, even biologically. So that's an inaccurate, biased, prejudiced way of looking at life. And so people were getting arrested, and people were getting arrested by the police who were doing their jobs, following the law. And some of them were a little bit too happy about doing it, right? But they were doing their jobs, following the law, checking people's sex to make sure that it aligned with what they were seeing as far as someone's gender expression goes. Today, we would never imagine anyone doing that, but that was rampant back then. So that act of pushing back on that police raid, and creating this uprising kept everything moving. So the Christopher Street Gay Liberation Day March was held in 1970 on June 28th. And it was both a celebration of what had happened the year before and a protest. And that march on June 28th, 1970, led to what we now see as gay pride parades. So we'll talk about this a little bit as we move forward, but gay pride is more than just, a happy festival or a happy parade. It's also protests. And it is also changing laws and drag shows and different, like the ways that we come together. And even through all of that, bar life and club life remains part of our history, and it remains part of the fabric of our lives. Because it's still where many of us go to meet other people just like us. So having said all of that, why do you think knowing this information would help, or how do you think knowing this information could help you when working with someone who's either new to recovery, or that you're coaching at us, to support them in their recovery as a coach? What you got, Khalees?
Well, we meet people where they're at. And I kind of feel like I'm cheating because I've done a similar training with you before where you did recovery coaching for the LGBTQ plus community. And so I kind of feel like, but it's not my job to ask people what their sex is, how they if whenever somebody feels comfortable, they will disclose that to me. And people have been stigmatized, and people have been treated poorly and horribly in all these different locations, and they get these looks that I just need to show them love and compassion, and I just want to help them, and whatever I can do, I meet them where they're at. And my job is to just support you, to make sure you feel safe, and I'm here for you. And I think this topic is really close to my heart in general, just because of family and friends and stuff like that. But that's my role, is to just be kind and loving and treat them like a human being that they are, and support them.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's definitely a big part of this, right? Is just meeting us where we are, supporting us, and being kind and loving. I see Tito's got LGBT Leadership Academy. Yes. Why else might knowing that where we come from and what we're actually celebrating on Pride, as well as knowing that bars and nightclubs are still part of our lives? What you got, Maisha?
So one of the things that came up for me while you were speaking, actually, there's so much, but one of the things that came up was this idea of the C-car three-legged stool. And one of the legs of the stool is discovering and managing my own stuff, right? Because sometimes I can revert back to my viewing the world in a binary system. You're either a 0 or you're a 1. It's either black or it's white. And there's so many gray areas, not just within the LGBTQ community, but within humans, within humans being humans. And another thing is, you mentioned some of the things that might be a part of stories of those that identify as LGBTQ. And I would just have to be sure to be able to discover and manage my own stuff around that. If I hear something that may not be it may not be true for me, but that doesn't mean that I have to act in judgment or criticism of anything. It means that I can figure out ways to support, and understanding what you're saying, I can figure out ways to support by getting resources, being equipped with resources that may be useful to those that I'm trying to help, those recoveries. But there's so much that I could have taken away from what you said already.
Nice. Thank you, Maisha. Yeah, 100%. I love the resources. What you got, Patrick?
I think too, it's the history part is important. I have a client right now who's a divorced dad in his mid 50s. He was outed 10, 15 years ago, has struggled with his drug use since, and also struggles with internal homophobia, struggles with a lot of the stuff about how does he belong, how can he live an authentic life. And so he's got, to Maisha's point, he unfortunately still sees everything in a binary, I'm either this or this, but trying to help him understand. And so for my purpose, having a good knowledge of the history of the LGBT movement and what we celebrate with Pride is really important to assure him that, there are other people who have, walked this path ahead of you and who are walking it with you. But it's that kind of thing. So there's that intersection. And for so many people, at least from my experience, the drug and alcohol use was trying to fill or mask or cover a sexual identity component. And so it's all sort of wrapped together, at least in my experience.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for that. Knowing about that internalized homophobia is so important, right? Because keep in mind that whatever things you heard growing up, right? Whatever things you heard growing up, if you were heterosexual, you might have just kind of dismissed it, or if you were cisgender, right? So cisgender means that your gender identity aligns with the sex that you were assigned at birth. And so if you were cisgender and heterosexual, then you may have heard those things, but they might not have sunk in as much as they did for somebody like me, who's part of the LGBT community, right? And so what I heard was, things like, God hates you. These bad things are happening to you because, the bad things are happening to the world because of the gays, right? And the bad things that are happening, you deserve it. And, you should not be able to access these places, right? So all of that rhetoric is stuff that we have to continuously, we will continuously uncover and have to create new stories for ourselves and find new people that can walk this path with us. They're not telling us those lies about ourselves. What you got, Laura?
Yeah, that's so good. Deprogramming, unlearning. What I think that I could help, what I would encounter as a recovery coach is, identity tied up with community in the bars and the clubs. And it's like how, that's can be so difficult to separate oneself from. And so, I would hope that someone in the community working with a coach would encounter, those resources again to find a different community. Not a different community, but find a way to still have community with the people they love, and be sober or drug free. So I would imagine that. Working along with someone in the LGBT community would involve a lot of maybe restructuring the thinking around the identity, just like Patrick and yourself were both just talking about. So I can see that would be some really, deep work going on there. Maybe I'm going to keep in mind now that I've said that might be better for a therapist in some ways to work, but make sure that I'm going to show up for that person and work with them in those terms, because I just can't imagine, having most of my community centered around a bar or nightclub, but I have friends that are exactly that. So, yeah, thanks for bringing up the question.
Yeah, thank you. I love that answer, right? Because it's true. We are part of a person's recovery care team, right? If they have one. And there are times that working with a therapist is much more effective, especially considering how we've got a lot, like the community as a whole, we've got some pretty good trauma going on. And some of it's just, from the total Freudian way of looking at like the the iceberg, right? Like you see the tip of it, and then there's all this stuff that's underneath it. And the stuff that's underneath it, that's the part that we can't see. And an LGBT trained therapist can really support someone with, while we do the thing that we're awesome at, which is asking people, how can I help you with your recovery today? Helping them to envision a life in recovery without the need for substances. And for some of us, right, myself included, like I still go places where there's drugs and alcohol, because that's where my community is. That's where I will find more people like me. And, like it will be a whole lot easier to find someone to date in a place where there's a lot of us, and I don't have to worry about, oh, I like that person. I wonder if they would be into me because of, like you don't have to question someone else's sexual orientation. You get to just show up and be you. Right. And so like there's a different skill set that as people, LGBT people in recovery, we need to develop in order to be able to go to those places. Right. Because the other piece is that it opens up the conversation about chosen family instead of just our blood family. Right. Because many of us have chosen family because we lose our blood family when we come out. Some of us have chosen family and we regain over time our blood family. So our chosen family still has a lot of the same dysfunction that we might find in a blood family. And like if you go to family reunions, well, family reunions for us might be, hey, we're all going to hit the club tonight. You want to come? And that's perfectly okay. It just requires a different mindset and a different skill set. What you got, Khalees, and then Patrick?
Well, I was just, whenever you were talking about the bars and clubs and stuff, I remember last year for the recovery conference, the theme was LGBTQ plus in the community and supporting people. And I talked to a manager of this amazing organization called like London Friend or something. And he was saying that something he sees as, chemsex and using these drugs and stuff are tied to their identity. And then if they're struggling with a drug problem, how do you fall into your identity and where you feel comfortable while you're dealing with like this and that battle? And I had never even considered that. That's not something I'd even thought about. And I was just kind of like, that's an interesting conversation. That's a whole new way to look at things. And two, but then you just mentioned too, like an LGBTQ plus therapist, like, are there specifically therapists just for the LGBTQ plus community? Like, that's amazing, just because I think, I can be a resource. I can give lots of resources, but that is not my zone. That's not my lane. And whenever I heard things like that, whenever I was talking to him, I was just kind of like, okay, I can learn, but I also need to know whenever it's my lane and it's not my lane, and to be a resource broker at that point.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, 100%, right? So things like this help us to know like, oh, wait, that's a resource that I can call on. Thank you. And chemsex is a big part of the gay male experience. Patrick, what you got?
Well, I'm glad Khalees brought that up, and Johanna, because I was going to go back to something you had talked about, which is one of the challenges, is certainly within the gay male and chemsex community, is for people who come into recovery, they often have to shut down completely those places of gathering, or they can't do that, right? Because those, going to a bar, going to a club, going to a sex club, whatever, are extremely triggering. and people are using around them. And what unfortunately, both for myself and some of my clients, is there's this, it's all tied together. So as Khalees was saying, it's tied together in such a tight way. And so what I know that, I try to help, and again, this client I mentioned earlier, because he keeps falling back to, well, the way I know how to meet guys is either online or in a club. And then he goes and does not have the tool set or the strength, and I say that, but doesn't have the tool set yet to turn down the drugs that are available. And so it's this split of, we want to continue to build and create our community, which is why LGBT 12-step meetings are so wonderful too, because you get a chance to really build that community there. But it's also the challenge of, well, I'm 25. What do you mean I can't go to a bar or a club for the rest of my life? That kind of thing. So it's a real, so I was building off of what you had said with that, and then what Khalees added, because it is probably one of the biggest challenges that I've seen as a coach and in 12-step programs, is where do we go for community that isn't triggering, and that the availability of drugs and alcohol isn't just right there.
Yeah, thank you for that. And as recovery coaches, that's something that we can ask ourselves, right? And we can start to ask the community that's around us. One of the things that, because Patrick's right on, and so one of the things I want to say is there's a difference. I know that we're talking about chemsex right now. That is a kink, right? So, and I want to say that there's a difference between soji and a kink, right? And so let me explain that. So SOGI is sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. Every single person in this room has a sexual orientation. You may be lesbian or gay or straight or pansexual or any number of things, right? That's your attraction to other people, or your lack of attraction to other people. Gender identity, that's who we in our minds think that we are, right? So this is the part that says, I am gender fluid, or I am all female, or I am all male, or I am any other number of pieces that we could be, right? Because gender is not a binary, it's on a continuum. So gender identity, every single one of us has a gender identity. And gender expression, we also all have a gender expression, right? That's how we do our gender. It's how we perform it. So you might think about the way that you wear your hair, or the way that you wear makeup or don't wear makeup, or paint your nails or don't paint your nails, or how you act, or the energy that you bring forth. Like, those things are gender expression. And so with gender expression, there is both how I'm performing it, how I'm doing it, and then your perception of my gender, right? So it's a two-sided piece, right? That, and every single one of us in this room has a gender expression. Now, kink and fetishes are different than that, right? So kink and fetish, you can think about as like they are words that mean the same, right? Kink is a slang, fetish is more what we're talking about, right? So fetishes, many people have fetishes, but not everyone does, right? It's more pronounced in the LGBT community because we talk about everything. Once you become a member of once you are introduced to the community and you decide that you want to be a member of the community, right? You can be part of us, right? And you can belong to the community, but not choose to be in the community. That's what I'm trying to say. So if you do choose to become part of the community, we talk about everything. We talk about the type of sex we like. We talk about like how we wear our hair or don't wear our hair. We talk about what it means to be LGBT. We talk about our history. We talk about our families. We talk about all those things because we're a family. And it's the one place where we get to communicate and be authentic, right? And so you'll hear more often in the LGBT community things about the leather community or the BDSM community, right? Or the furry community or the swinger community, or, you know, all of that, where you may not hear it in the heterosexual community, not because they're not doing it, it's just because you, straight people tend not to be as open and about these types of things as what we are. Doesn't mean that everyone is, it just means that there's a little bit more of a social barrier, right? I hope that makes sense and it's not offensive. I say that to say, like, I just want to be really clear about what we're talking about, right? We're talking about SOGI, even though we're talking about the other things. And I say that to bring up a really important part, right? Is that, and I'm gonna read what Ruth wrote in the chat box because it's important. The gay liberation movement in Ireland also dates from the early 1970s, with marches eventually becoming Pride, beginning almost immediately, just like the United States. No dress codes, but male homosexuality was a criminal offense into the 90s, which that's the way it is around most of the world, right? Is like once it started popping off, it just kept popping off, just like the other civil rights movements, right? Once it started popping off, it started popping off. And I say all of that to say, we have a history of violence in our community, right? We often talk about the Holocaust as just being a Jewish genocide, and that's not true. There were many people that were part of that genocide, including the LGBT community. So the pink triangle that you see in the upper left-hand side, that is how the Germans during World War II and during this period of the Holocaust, they marked us inside of concentration camps. The LGBT community was part of those concentration camps. We carry that in our history as part of that iceberg. Gene Compton's cafeteria riots, right? So they're also called the Compton riots or the Compton uprising. This event happened in 1966 in San Francisco, and it was similar to the Stonewall Inn uprisings. The difference between the Compton riots and the Stonewall riots is that the Compton riot, the Compton uprising, I'm just gonna call it an uprising because that's really what we're talking about. It looked like a riot at the time, but it was really an uprising, right? So the difference is that uprising is when people start to notice and they're like, we're not standing for this anymore, period. It's more than just like, I'm rioting for the sake of rioting, right? We have riots that have nothing to do with getting our rights. I mean, we see them at sporting events, you know, it's horrible, but we do see them, right? Uprisings are different. And so the big difference between the Compton uprising and the Stonewall uprising is that the Compton uprising was largely transgender women. And yes, they are part of our community, the LGBT community, and they haven't always been seen or supported in the same way that sexual orientation minorities have been. With the Christopher Street uprising, the Stonewall uprising, there were every member of our community, LGBTQ, we were all there, right? So that's the biggest difference. This Compton riot kind of set the stage for groups like the Mattachine Society to start to picket, right? And to do the typical civil rights, let's raise awareness type of thing, for the Daughters of Bilitis to start their magazines, and for other organizations to come forward and really start to communicate who we were and to start to edge our way out of the shadows. And then the last thing is we like to think that violence is something that's very far in our distant past, but it's not. This picture is from the Pulse nightclub shooting in 2019. We just celebrated, I want to say celebrate, it's not what we did, we commemorated, we memorialized the Pulse shootings just recently, you know, in the last several days, weeks, right? And many of us are still thinking about that and pondering that. So we like to say that it's gone, but it's not. Every single LGBT person in this room, every single LGBT person that you will work with has a sense of awareness of the violence that can at any point in time be perpetrated against us for any reason, mostly just being perceived as who we are. And so I say that to say, like, it's not just us, right? LGBT adjacent, right? So if someone perceives you to be LGBT, but you're really not, you may still be part of this violence against us. So perception is just as important as reality. And that's why overcoming stereotypes is so important. And that brings us to our symbols, right? So just like anything that's negative, right? Like we have a history of like people, period, have a need to reclaim things and make them ours, right? The LGBT community is not any different. This picture here in the left is Harvey Milk, and he's wearing the pink triangle. Many, like I've worn pink triangles. I'm sure that other people have worn pink triangles during the 80s and the AIDS crisis. We would wear it on our shirts, right? During the 90s, we would wear it on our shirts. And part of it is so that we recognize each other, but the other part of it is because of visibility. And just like every minority group that has negative slurs or negative symbols, at some point you go from, surviving to thriving, and thriving means claiming your own and creating your own narrative about who you are. So does anyone in here know the story of the flag that would like to share? Okay, so let me do that then. Yes, before I do that, I'm acknowledging Patrick's comment in the chat. If you have not seen the news yet, please read about the arrests that happened this past weekend in Idaho. 31 men who had the intention of rioting and causing disruption, violent disruption at an Idaho Pride event. This is, I would like to say, it's not as normal as what it has been. And also this is something that every single LGBT community thinks about. And if they're like, whatever the organization is that sets the standard and that sponsors the Pride event, that makes it happen, security is definitely one of the things that we look for to make sure that we know that people are going to be safe, or at least to plan for it and let people know that this may become violent. You don't plan for, you as a participant, we know that you had no intention of being violent, and know that violence could happen today. That is something that every single Pride event still, the participants still have to acknowledge today. I'm glad that you brought that up. So let me tell you about the flag, because the flag is super important and it's something that you'll see a lot, right? You'll see different renditions. So Harvey Milk, the guy on the left, this picture is actually from, I snagged this picture from the Holocaust Memorial Museum. And he asked, because we were using this pink triangle, right, to let ourselves be known, he asked a friend to create a more positive symbol that could replace that upside down triangle. He was Jewish and he knew the heavy history behind the pink triangle, right? Like, that's a really serious history. He asked Gil Baker. Gil Baker is the creator of the 8-color flag that you see in the right-hand side. the original flag was handmade and it was hand dyed. And that is the first LGBTQIA+ flag. It originally had 8 colors, and you can see that each color has a meaning next to it. So the hot pink stood for sex. The red stands for life. The orange stands for healing. The yellow is sunlight. The green is nature. The blue is serenity. And the purple is spirit. These flags, these 8 color flags, were flown at Gay Freedom Day on June 25th, 1978 at the United Nations Plaza in San Francisco. And because Gil had made this flag by hand dyeing it, eventually I'm sorry, I missed the turquoise. The turquoise is in there right between the green and the indigo, right? And it stands for magic and art. And because these 2 colors, the hot pink and the turquoise, could not be mass produced, they were dropped from the flag. And what you see in the middle here, the LGBT rainbow flag, that has been our flag since 1978, when we started mass producing them. And that's the flag that you most likely have seen or recognize, just like that. Now, there are more flags. There's 2 that have picked up a lot of steam, right? So when you look at our logo, right? So my logo, the Dolan logo, you can see it in the top left hand where it's got the A. And what we use is the Philadelphia Pride flag. This Philadelphia Pride flag was created in Philadelphia in 2017. And they added the black and brown stripe for the inclusion of Black, Indigenous people of color, right? So we want to we want to make sure that all the intersections are included, because we're a really big community, and everyone will, like it's not inclusive if it doesn't include all of us, right? And that's part of the reason why we use it, right? Is this is who we are, and we can't be working with just white folk. We're everybody. And then the second flag is the Progress Pride flag. This was designed by Daniel Quasar. It is the trans colors and marginalized community stripes. And you can see that it's a chevron, right? And it's meant to be, the meaning behind the chevron is forward movement. So the trans flag is the flag that you'll see that is white, pink, and blue. And that's the piece that makes up that far left-hand side, right? So when you see these flags, sometimes you'll see just a trans flag alongside a rainbow flag, just a rainbow flag, right? Sometimes you'll see the Philadelphia Pride flag, as in, if you ever come to visit me, we've got the Philadelphia Pride flag with a trans flag. And then some folks use the Progress flag. And that is all of us combined in one flag, right? And because these flags have been updated, right? Some of us will continue to use flags and certain flags until, we replace our flags, and then we'll have another conversation about, well, which flag do we want to use, right? And so that's probably still working itself out, even amongst the community, right? And that leads me to this, is you guys have probably seen a bunch of other flags, like the LGBT, like the lesbian flag and the bi flag and all of these other flags. There's a bunch of them. There's like 150 different flags, which is a lot, right? And not everybody knows all the flags. I don't know all the flags. I don't know anyone that knows all the flags, like off the top of their head. So like, I would just assume that most people do not. But I can't make that's a story I'm telling myself. So cancel that. Maybe someone does know all of them, right? And The reason we have the ability to have all those flags and that diversity and to be able to signify in those really detailed ways is because things have started to change for the LGBT community, right? We are definitely part of this huge group, right? The LGBT community, and we're able to start seeing ourselves as smaller groups, which means that more and more of us will be able to start really getting into what does it mean to be bisexual? What does it mean to be trans? What does it mean to be pansexual? What does it mean to be gay, right? And to be able to pull all of that information out is a privilege that we didn't have until a little bit ago. What do you have?
Elizabeth who?
Oh, I thought he was getting ready to say he knew all the flags. What you got, Khalees?
No, I think I was just gonna say, like, I think it was last year on like Trans Awareness Day, like one of my best friends is trans. That's very close to my heart. We've been friends since I was 17 years old. And I posted about it and I got a lot of shit. I got a lot of shit because I posted about Trans Awareness Day. And it was like, but I'm like, you sit there and you support Pride. You post all about Pride. Why would you give me shit about posting about Trans Awareness Day? And I think whenever you were just talking about all these different flags and stuff, you know, and how far we've come in the history, like it's taken us this long to finally get some acceptance around Pride and like, you know, gay men and lesbians and like all the stuff that like now introducing these pansexuals and trans, like people are, we still have a long, long ways to go. I just think, you know, when it comes to things like that. And it's just, I mean, I'm still going to support my friends, you know, and my family and like stuff like that. But I just think publicly, you know, because here, especially too, I think here in the UK, because I challenged it. I mean, I did challenge it. Like, what are you saying? And they're like, it's a very political thing here in the UK. Like all of a sudden, like governments and politicians and, you know, you can lose. And I'm like, but why would I I'm not going to change myself. Let me teach them something, you know, let me introduce them to Ian. Come on, Ian, you know, whatever. But like, I just think that here we still have a lot, and two, in the US, when it comes to trans and pansexual and all these different, you know, ways that people are expressing themselves, we still have a long ways to go.
Thank you for saying that. And thank you for standing up for your friend. That's what this takes, right? Is not every person in the LGBT community wants the same rights that our straight cisgender counterparts have. And many of us do, right? So none of us speak for all of us. And having someone who's willing to use their privilege and stand up for us and make sure that we're included is super important, just like it's important for every other minority group, right? So thank you for that. Every single time that we make progress like this, it gives scientists the ability to quantify who we are, right? As biologically different, right? And that information can help go a long way to being able to make it easier to accept us. I got one more thing to say about this before we start talking about like some of our heroes, right? Because there's a lot of heroes and there's a lot of encouragement. I need you guys to see this video. And it's mostly, and this video in particular is the US. It's done by the Human Rights Campaign. And let me make sure that I'm going to stop sharing for just a second so I can make sure that the volume comes through. So bear with me. I'm so sorry. There we go. Okay. All right. Let me see, show the video panel. Okay, there you guys go. Okay, so this video is done by the Human Rights Campaign. I know that we have a national audience, and the Human Rights Campaign has the work that they do impacts us all internationally. This video is about the United States in particular, and it takes about a minute.
America. 50 states promising freedom for all. But today, under state law in 29 states, a business could refuse service because of who you love. Housing could be denied because of your gender identity. Medical care could be rejected because you're a woman with a wife. In 29 states, basic freedoms are missing for millions of LGBTQ+ Americans. This flag is the LGBTQ+ reality. But we can change it, because this is America.
So why do you guys think I would have shown that video in this room? What do you think? Okay, I got Angie and then Patrick.
So I'm going to say that you showed it because it's kind of a reality check that it's not equal for everybody. And I think I'm just going to say this in my terms because I have a really hard time dancing on words. For me, I treat everybody like I want to be treated, but not everybody's like that. And yeah, they're still doing the same thing. They're putting people in categories. And my oldest daughter actually says to me, Mom, just because you're nice, because I'm like, just let it go. Don't worry about what other people say. She's like, Mom, you don't have to deal with it. And that actually got me the other day because I support her in everything. But I guess I don't know what people are saying and doing to her, which it's not as easy to just let go as I make it sound. So this is just a reality check, I feel like, for people.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Yeah, 100%. Like, you may be my ally. You may be my friend. You do not know what it is like to live in my skin, right? And this shouldn't be political at all. This is about like just allowing a human being to be a human being, right? To allow like someone to be exactly who they are. And yet we are often used as the political football in many countries, right? Trans rights. Yeah, to Tito's point, going to the bathroom, whether or not you're going to let us marry, whether or not you're going to let us adopt, you know, like all of those things, they should not be political. And yet somehow they are. And so as a coach, how can you navigate that, help someone to navigate that while not having a political conversation? Because it's a skill that you guys are going to need to develop when working with the LGBT community. We don't want you to get involved in politics. We do want you to be able to have this conversation. What you got, Patrick?
I'm just going to say ditto to what Angie said. That was exactly the point I was going to bring up.
Nice, thank you. So how about it? What do you guys think? As recovery coaches, how do we have a conversation with someone who's part of the LGBT community when we know that during seasons, right, because politics are seasonal, during some seasons, they are going to be a lot more targeted than others? What do you think?
Can I just jump? I'm just gonna, jump in. I think
Yeah.
it's just kind of like goes back to what I was saying, you know, it's like having that awareness of those seasons you're saying, and like being able to provide resources and make sure they're safe within that time would be my role as a recovery coach. So ensuring I am doing my best to provide the necessary resources, no matter what period it is, but having that awareness that this could be a tough time and making sure I take extra steps maybe to provide them with the resources needed. Yeah, is that it?
Yeah, I love that answer. This is a tough time, making sure you've got, yes.
Yeah. Like I know that, you know, this one's hard or something, or like whatever, and just making sure. I just wanted to say something really quick too, when you were talking about, like, you know, my friend I mentioned earlier, like we've been friends since we were 17, but how we met was in college and we were roommates. And his name is Ian. He is a trans man today, you know, but like we used to cuddle, we were friends and everything, but he was trans and he got put in a room with me, you know what I'm saying, in a boys and girls rooms. And I just think even little things like that, like, are we asking people where they want to sleep? You know, we're just assuming that this is where they belong. And I mean, now we're, like I said, we're best friends, but like, that's just, I'll never forget that, you know, I'll never forget that. They just said that this is where you belong and they put him in this box, like, although he didn't want to be in that box. So I just, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's true, right? Like, this is part of being a coach, is asking people about themselves, right? What do you need? Not what do I think you need? Because what, you know, like your friend Ian, right? And like what I need as someone that's been in recovery for a while, right? And has done a lot of work around, you know, my own internalized homophobia and transphobia and all those things, and what it means like to me, and all the, you know, all the things that come along with it. It's different than what someone else might need, right? So yes, asking what does this person need and being mindful and having resources, hugely helpful. You guys are killing it. So Pride Month, right? When was the first Pride Month? You guys know? No? Okay. 1999. Yep. So Pride Month was held for 2 years. It was first introduced by President Clinton in the United States as Gay and Lesbian Pride Month, right? So it wasn't even all of us back then. It was just Gay and Lesbian Pride Month in 1999 and 2000. It was a huge deal, especially considering how Clinton was the one that put in Don't Ask, Don't Tell, right? So even though we had all of these things, like you can't, oh, I see the face. Don't Ask, Don't Tell is you cannot, at the time, you could not be a member of the LGBT community and out if you were in the United States military. If you were outed, you would be removed. Many of us are, myself included, were removed from military service in the United States because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And for many of us, that's a reason why a lot of us use, right? Or at least why we started down that path, because we got to drown some stuff, right? So we've got this Don't Ask, Don't Tell thing going on. And at the same time, we've got this whole month that's dedicated to us in 1999 and 2000 by President Clinton, right? So I say that to say that it's complicated, right? It's complicated. We didn't have Pride Month between 2001 to 2008, right? We got Pride Month again in 2009 until 2016, when President Barack Obama declared June LGBT, so all of us, right? So the LGBT Pride Month. And then we did not have it again during the Trump administration. We received it back again this last year in 2021. And now, of course, we've got it. So, and the White House in the United States and many countries around the world are doing things to acknowledge us and celebrate us. I see some faces. And I say that because it's important, right? We have a lot of heroes. We have so many heroes, people that you may know about, and then people that you might not know about, right? So the picture on the left, does anyone know who that is? Nope. Okay, this is Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was a member of the LGBT community. He got married for political reasons, and he had a male lover his entire, like, from the moment he met him until the day that he died. He is, he single-handedly led the, he conquered most of the known world during his time. I see some people laughing. Hercules, oh my God, yes, I love that. Yeah, oh my, good. Kathy, you got this. Marty Mann on the far right-hand side. Without Marty Mann, none of us would be in this room right now. Marty Mann was one of the first women in Alcoholics Anonymous. Yes, Alan Turing, we're going to get him in a second. Marty Mann was one of the first women in Alcoholics Anonymous. She created the National Council on Alcohol and Drug Addiction, the NCADD, and she's the one that created, that advocated for us again and again and again in the United States and around the world for us to be treated as human beings. Yeah, women suffer too, 100%. The interesting thing about Marty Mann is that while she did chills again, while she did so many things for millions and billions of us, she was not able to be her authentic self. She hid who she was, because if she had come out, none of us would be here. That is the significance of who and what we are. We add so much to the world. Alan Turing is the gentleman in the middle. Without Alan Turing, you wouldn't have this. This is my Apple iPhone, right? Alan Turing is the father of modern computing. He's also the creator of the Enigma machine, and the Enigma machine is the reason why World War II was able to be ended. The Enigma machine decoded the German messages so that the Allies were able to mount a defense, an effective defense, and eventually go on the offense against the Axis countries. And what that did is it ended the World War II, and it ended the Holocaust. So without Alan Turing, none of us would be here. Alan Turing paid for being a gay male. Oh, thank you for that. He was not the creator of the Enigma machine. He broke the code of the Germans' Enigma machine. Yes, you're right. Thank you. He figured out how it worked. I'm so sorry. Thank you for that. He paid for being a gay man. When it was found out that he was a gay man, he was chemically castrated. And so he spent the rest of his life in misery. These types of things happen all throughout the world, right? Some of us are allowed to be like Alexander the Great and be out, you know? Others of us do not have that privilege at all. And in order for us to do our work, we are our authentic self in a closet. And still others of us, once we are found out, we lose everything. There's a song called Take Me to Church that was written in response to the Russian treatment of LGBT people. If you have never heard Take Me to Church, I strongly recommend listening to it. It is a beautiful song, and it is chilling what it stands for and what it signifies. And that's another reason, right? And so this sorrow that we carry with us is intermingled with the pride that we have in who we are and our accomplishments. And then, you know, finding pride events in your community. So we talked a little bit about how some pride events are full of joy, right? Like the picture in the right-hand side. And some pride events are like this one. This is taken during the pandemic, during the civil, I don't want to call that a civil unrest either. That was a civil uprising, right? So this is a march of protest that Black trans lives matter, you know? And so whether you are looking for a protest or a celebration, you'll be able to find it. How are you finding pride events in your community, or how can you support recoveries in finding them? What do you think?
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in. Like, I know we're having the Newcastle Pride walk in. It's in Newcastle. So like a lot of our community is in Newcastle. And so we're talking, you know, hey, we're going to be in Newcastle. Let's all come out together. Let's support people in recovery and pride and just everything. And like coming out, just gathering people together. So that's what I know.
Thank you.
I try to share a lot of resources, or like just, you know, make it clear like I do support people on, for example, my social media or things like that, and just, you know, here's how activities or tools or resources for the LGBTQ+ community.
Yeah, thank you for that. I love that, being proactive and sharing what you know. 100%. How else can we find them? What you got, Angie?
So in my community, there's nothing anywhere. And it's hard to find any event. Even, I mean, it's awful. And a lot of times you have to go out of state or drive hours and hours to find something in that event kind of thing. But I feel like if the person or whatever, like you could still utilize and look for it. But I'm just in my community alone, it's not. There's not. Which is really sad, actually.
Yeah, it totally is. And your community is not uncommon. So what do you think what could you do to support people who want to celebrate and want to commemorate Pride? What do you think?
Help them set something up.
Yeah, 100%. Help them set something up, create safe spaces for them. Love that. Thank you. I got a website. I'm popping it into the chat. I see you, Laura. So this website is www.gaycities.com. You can type in /events/pride, or you can just use the menu, and that can help you to find some pride events and just gay events in general, LGBT events in general. What do you got, Laura?
Yeah, I was going to suggest, you know, a lot of even like small towns like mine, we're about maybe 100,000 population here. We don't really have any events, but at the local college, there are some events. If there aren't events at some kind of educational venue in your town, then certainly you could check. There's got to be like a community events website or Chamber of Commerce or something like that that we could check. But yeah, I think any kind of like little downtown enclave type area is usually the place where that's going to happen, or at a college or a high school sometimes too. So yeah, I'll check those.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's perfect. Colleges have a lot of stuff. Another organization that you can check out is Centerlink. So Centerlink is you can think about them as like it's a club for all of the LGBT communities, community centers. And there's a lot of us all throughout the world. Some of us have actual physical locations and some of us do not. But if you Google Centerlink LGBT, it'll bring you to the website, and then you can find the organizations that are close to you. One of the cool things about working with an LGBT community center is that, and I'm a little biased because I'm on the board of the Frederick Center, which is Frederick City, Frederick counties, here in Maryland, LGBT center. We host a Frederick Pride every single year, and we have groups and organizations that we work with. We have, like, for instance, this weekend we'll have something we call Sober Tea, right? So it's an LGBT dance party that's 100% sober. We also have trans youth groups and those types of things, as well as Aging with Pride, right? So services for people of all ages and all types of, membership on the spectrum, as well as services for family members, right? So I say that to say we are not unique. We're specific to our community, and we're not unique. Many LGBT centers have services, behavioral health services for our community right there, as well as we host events all throughout the year. Many of them happen during Pride, and we also do them all throughout the year. So I've got a couple minutes, and I just want to share two things. One is that the reason, well, I'll share this quote, right, is that it's directly from Karamo Brown. So he is one of the hosts of the show Queer Eye. It's on Netflix. It's a great show. Check it out. Yeah, absolutely. There are many 12-step groups for LGBT communities, and more organizations are also starting to have recovery groups for LGBT folks. And you can find them by looking at AA General Services website too. So thank you for that. Karamo says that I believe that the term coming out is a bit antiquated and outdated in the sense that it gives the power to someone else to accept or deny you, when in actuality, what the process is that we're letting people into our lives. So for some of us, what Karamo says is very true, right? Is that we do live in areas where it's safe to be us. Nothing bad is going to happen to us. To let people in up close, right? And so we get to have conversations about what we want and what we need and be very specific about it. But for others of us, this is a level of privilege and a level of access that does not exist, right? Think back to the 29 states in the video, right? There's services and there's laws and there's all these things that we can lose just when we either come out and we share with someone, hey, I'm letting you know this about myself, or we invite people in, like, hey, get to know me, right? We want people to be able to have this level of privilege, that we just invite people in, like, my favorite color is blue, right? That's where we want this to be one day. That's not where we are yet. The work that we do as recovery coaches, that you all do, right, by simply being here and having resources, like knowing that there's 12-step groups for LGBT recoveries, right? Knowing that and being able to share that information makes it possible for this to be a true quote, right? And that brings me to this piece right here, is that, and that's what I have on my shirt, right? Is the reason I do this is because there's an estimated 20 to 30% of LGBT people that suffer with substance use disorder. When you compare that to the 9% of people that have substance use disorder, like, just in general, that's a massive difference. And the more we have resources that include us, and not just include us, but allow us to be our most authentic selves, the better it is for us to create lives where we don't need to rely on substances. And the easier it is to create lives where one day maybe we won't even seek and search for the substance. So I want to say that, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for participating. I hope that I gave you some information to help you understand Pride, and that thank you. And then I gave you some, a little bit of insight into some of our symbols, and provided you with some encouragement to know that, like, even though things are sometimes look really hard and really bleak, we've made lots of progress, and we'll continue to make lots of progress if people like you guys keep showing up for things like this and then apply it to the people that you work with, that we work with. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments or? Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Yes. Oh, I'm so glad Patrick put into the chat box. He said, if you have clients who are struggling with crystal meth, check out crystalmeth.org for resources. What you got, Khalees?
I was just going to say how shocked I am whenever you were talking about Pride Month and like all the dates, the gaps and things, because I've been celebrating Pride Month for as long as I can remember. I can't think of like whenever. And I'm just so in shock about that. So my mind is blown that, when Trump was president, we didn't have it. And between these years, we didn't have it. And I don't know. I just never knew that. I never knew that it was not a real thing for a couple of years and gaps in between. And I also was reminded too, that really wasn't that long ago. If we really think about it, 1999, that's really not that long ago. So thank you. Well done, Joanna. Well done, muchacho.
Thank you, Khalees. What you got, Patrick?
I was just gonna fill Khalees in a little bit, and I think maybe clarify a little on what you were saying, Johanna. There have been Pride activities and Pride parades and everything. It's the official designation by the U.S. government as Pride Month. So that was where President Clinton started it, and where certain presidents haven't issued that formal sort of declaration. So that's sort of, Pride activities have taken place continually, as you were saying, Khalees, but that sort of official imprimatur, if you will, from the U.S. government was denied at various times.
Yeah, thank you very much for clarifying that, because that's true, right? Is the LGBT community, we don't stop. Period. Hard stop. We don't stop. This is about making certain that we have safe spaces, not just safe spaces, because that is very limiting. It's about making sure that we're able to be ourselves, right? And that we're able to be ourselves without consequence. The way that we've had severe consequences. And the way that many, maybe you, take for granted. The positive, just being able to be yourself. So I want to say again, thank you for being here. Thank you for participating and for continuing to do this work. It really matters.